I didn't know anything about e-com or building a brand either, if I'm honest. So I don't know what I was thinking.
You've grown it to an 8-figure brand, you've raised capital, you started from essentially nothing, like you hadn't run a business before yourself. How have you worked that out, having been the sort of first-time founder that you are?
Adapting, keep making mistakes, learning from them, listening to people. It's all about hiring the right people, but the best people that you can find. Like, you should be going for the best person in the world for that role, incentivizing them accordingly, giving them space and autonomy to make decisions.
You started in potentially the best and potentially the worst time to start a business.
We launched on the day lockdown was announced. What could have taken 10 years took 2. We're going against businesses that are very, very large. I mean, the largest is Sherwin-Williams, which is over 90 billion in valuation. I think is really important is knowing what you're good at and knowing what you're bad at and making sure you have a team around that supplements. So I've got quite an ADHD-like personality. I'm not incredibly strong with details. I'm not a great manager, to be honest. I made sure I built the team around that.
We are here today with Lucas London of Lick. You've had this incredible journey launching through COVID and disrupting a $93 billion market, going up against, the old timers like Farrow and Ball and taking them on with a D2C approach, which has now expanded into a multi-channel approach. We're super interested to hear about the story so far, what the plans are going into the future, and, really just understand how you built this formidable business. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Very kind and great summary.
So tell us, if we go all the way back to the beginning, you were a banker, you were working in finance. Can you tell us how, you kind of made this shift from, a more traditional career, I would say, to the wonderful world of startups and, doing it on your own?
Yeah, absolutely. I studied in finance because I loved businesses. So rather than loving finance, I really wanted exposure to the businesses. So we were a hedge fund investing in UK equities and loved to be on what I thought at the time was the kind of the front line of businesses and meeting those companies. And after a while, it just became very apparent that I really wanted to be a part of the company rather than sort of trading them. So was always looking for an opportunity to leave and start moving towards being an entrepreneur. And I got an opportunity to join a startup at the time who actually came in to see if we wanted to invest in them, joined them and kind of never looked back and have been operating since then.
And that was the Airtasker business? Was that your first?
No, the first business was a business called Yabble, which was a social messaging app. So trying to take on the Facebooks or Metas of this world. And it was definitely a steep learning curve, but an amazing experience.
And what happened with that business? That sounds like a tough market to crack.
Yeah, it was a very tough market, and it ended up not working, and ended up going into administration, and the huge amount of learnings from that experience. We were really at the time trying to create an all singing, all dancing app that could do a lot of things when actually an MVP approach would have been a much better route. But
it took on too much in the early stages then to be able to cut through that niche and make it actually work?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of things that were done in the wrong way. I mean, it was an interesting time because we were trying to create a platform in the same way Meta had done, in the same direction, where then you saw the growth of TikTok at that time with a very, very simple product. We tried to, rather than launch with a simple product and try and get traction, too much capital was spent in trying to invest into producing the final product and focusing on traction too late in the game.
I think what's interesting then in your journey, because obviously you were a banker, you're employed, you're on payroll, then you became an entrepreneur. Can people learn entrepreneurship? Are they born with it? Can they, have a full-time career and then become an entrepreneur? Is it something you innately have as an individual?
Yeah, I mean, an entrepreneur is a very broad term, and I know I was the one that said the word, but it means so many different things and so many different things to different people. Like how I run the business and how I operate could be extremely different from how someone else does. I definitely, from a young age, wanted to build and create businesses from, I remember whether it be washing cars or selling football cards at the time, I clearly had that desire, and that was influenced by my surroundings. I think a lot of it to do with risk taking. I'm a massive believer in in being able to take those risks and being okay with failure. And I think definitely that first experience when it seemed a really big deal, that business not going down. And obviously, it was to a degree, but you come out the other side of it and you carry on going, you learn all the things. So no, I don't think you're born into it. I definitely was exposed to sort of building businesses from a young age and have kind of always wanted to go down that route.
When was that sort of inflection point? When did you decide then, when you were in the world of banking, that actually this is no more, you want to jump ship, you want to start something yourself? Did you see a gap? Did you move into another company and sort of transition out? How did that work?
What I've always looked for in roles is I never wanted to just earn my salary. I wanted there to be an opportunity for something bigger. And hedge fund has that opportunity where you earn your salary, but if the fund performs well, you get carry. And at the time, it was a well-known hedge fund, but still there was a lot of opportunity to build that business as well. When I joined Yubble, again, it was, yes, salaried, but there was equity, and we were trying to build, potentially a massive business in terms of a social media platform. And the same, the last role I took before Lick was a company called Airtasker, and I was incentivized with equity and building that business in Europe, which was an Australian business at the time. So kind of every role I've had definitely has an element of entrepreneurship. When I actually made that transition was after Airtasker, they wanted me to move to Australia, which didn't suit our family at the time. And my wife was a market director of Vita Coco, and her career was going very well. So we wanted to stay put, and we had a 3-month window where I had gardening leave. And I just thought, you know what, let's try and start a business. At the end of it, if I haven't, then let's go get a job. And we went down, me and my co-founder went down a few routes. I remember calling my parents saying, I think we should start a carpet company. And then we didn't do that. No, then my co-founder wanted us to start a CBD business. And he was. And I liked his approach. We actually went down to some CBD factories in Derby, and we went down that, and then shifted into paint and thought, I think there's something here. And it's interesting because the truth is, and I always advise this, is we just started an investment deck. And it's a really good way of starting that journey. You just start with one slide and go, build out the deck and speak to a few people. And then if you raise money, you carry on. And suddenly 5 years down the line, you think, how the hell did I get here? So yes, there was a moment where I wanted to start my own business, but it was a fleeting moment, and it could have happened 5 years later as well.
People say to go into a market that you know something about, though, and to go into a niche that you understand, or to develop something that is a gap genuinely, like within an industry. But you didn't really know much about paint. You couldn't see that there was actually a gap in the market at all at the point that you were at that company. How did you work that through over those 3 months? You needed to start a company. It just so happens it's worked.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about e-com or building a brand either, if I'm honest. So I don't know what I was thinking. We were just excited about the problem. Yeah. We just thought it's a massive market, and there was, at the time, we liked that it was an offline market, so we could build an online business and take market share. We liked that there wasn't any brand in the mass market space. There was Farrow & Ball, but that's a very small percentage of the market. And we knew there was a customer problem, which was solving color choice. Mm-hmm. People don't have the confidence or information to choose color for their home. So we thought if we could solve those 3 problems, we could take market share and build a massive business in this category. And it's funny when you want to start a business, I think you just need to be passionate enough about the idea, and the rest will come, and it will evolve so much over when you're building it. Yes, we looked for things like, is the market size big enough? There's certain opportunities with a sort of almost an investor hat on. Mm-hmm. But it kept evolving. Even from like those first slides, when we got to the second or third slide of the deck, we thought, oh wow, the market's interesting. We didn't know this. And then,
well, there was really no one else doing a D2C paint business back then, right? It wasn't really sold online.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's not really anyone doing it now as well, because we've adapted to be an omnichannel business for a good reason. But no, it was the industry is made up of very large, historically chemical companies that are big manufacturers that aren't really interested in building brands. So a lot of the things we found out later on made us realize, oh, wow, this is a much better opportunity than we thought. And even when we launched and the brand really resonated with people, we found, oh, wow, people really respond to this brand because it's in a kind of brandless space, when actually, if we had launched a clothing brand, we would just been another brand in a business in a very competitive space. So, there were dynamics along the journey that we also found actually didn't suit us. It's not a high repeat product. It's expensive to ship. There's extreme customer behavior in people going to store and wanting paint when and where they needed it. And businesses like B&Q have huge dominance in the market and were very hard to compete against. But in other ways, we found out along the journey that, it's a really acquisitive space. We were likely to get acquired one day. Brands get a high multiple because it allows people to sell paint at a higher price point. And that, it's in some ways, it's incredibly uncompetitive from building a brand space, and it's got a really positive community online. There's so many aspects that we just learned along the way, and you just got to start somewhere. Don't you?
Well, it's an incredibly visual product, I guess. You literally see the end result very quickly, and people then want to share it online. I think, my understanding of a large part of your success, correct me if I'm wrong, is the online community and people really loving to share what they've done with their home and, how it's worked for them. You maybe talk us through how you thought about that at the beginning and how that's evolved over time.
Yeah, sure. So we wanted to be a community-driven brand at the beginning because at the time everyone was community-driven brands, I think. And we didn't really know necessarily what that meant in terms of what it would mean for us, because it's very different. Everyone uses that word. What was a real trigger moment is we were getting our friends to decorate during COVID and asking them to send us some content. And there was one piece of content from a friend who they were decorating a house in Tooting that people can relate to. The couple you could really resonate with. They had, I think, the dog pissed on the floor while they were decorating, and his wife had a glass of wine while they were painting. And the content just performed really well. And we thought, okay, well, this is interesting because it's real people and people resonate with it, and it encourages other people to decorate. And that was the first moment where I thought, okay, well, the community can inspire and educate the rest of the community on how to decorate and use color. And then that content performs well and people want to share that content with us. And it created a sort of, we call it a people power decorating movement, which is a bit cheesy, but at the time when everyone was decorating at home and we were getting a lot of content, and we started to supplement that content with high quality influencer content, it did create this content flywheel that we used across our social, our digital ads, and that UGC converted and performed really well. There was that interesting moment later on the line where we had to start working out what our brand actually looks like without UGC. And that was and continues to be a challenge because we were so purely online and community driven that we hadn't actually created any asset ourselves, branded asset ourselves, apart from the team decorating, for instance.
Wow.
And that was an interesting moment. So we our community is the foundations of our brand, and what's great is it's a very positive place.
We'll just take a quick pause there. We'll get back to the episode in a minute. But I just wanted to say thank you to you guys who are listening to this episode, who are subscribing and following the podcast. If you haven't already, please do hit that follow and subscribe button. And maybe you can also share it with friends, with family, and with colleagues to hopefully inspire them on their entrepreneurial journey. Genuinely, we can't do this podcast without you. So thank you. Let's get back to the episode.
And obviously that's amazing that you've built that now, but you started in potentially the best and potentially the worst time to start a business. And I believe it was March 2020.
Yeah, we launched on the day lockdown was announced.
And was that on purpose or was that just good or bad luck?
It wasn't. I reflect on it a lot and I don't know whether it was good or bad luck. In many ways, it was a very good time to launch our business, and it was hard to say that because it was obviously a very negative time for the country and for people. But there was a high demand for online paint, and no one could sell paint online. People were at home; they wanted to decorate. And also on top of that, people just wanted to consume home content.
Yeah,
and the home became much more of a place, I guess, like fashion has always been, where more of a representation of yourself because you were inviting people to your home through Zoom. So people were even being bolder with color, whereas they used to maybe paint in more grays.
Interesting.
And that led to real rapid growth, both on community and revenue, and challenges on demand. And that was positive. What could have taken 10 years, took 2.
Yeah.
It allowed us to raise lots of capital, hire in a place where people necessarily weren't hiring. So we built an amazing team. And for that reason, it was fantastic. I guess for the negative is that it made us believe that it was norm.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, that's mad, because how could you think that period would be normalized?
But we were all talking about the new normal, like it was being drilled into us every day through media and through everyone was saying, we're never going back to the office. We're never, our homes are where we're going to exist 24 hours a day. And
and it was hard to differentiate for us whether the early business idea of a D2C paint brand was correct and everyone was buying paint online, or whether people were only buying paint online because the stores were closed.
Yeah.
And we obviously grew as well when stores opened over periods. And for that reason, I guess at that point, it meant we invested more aggressively than we should have been. And we probably behaved or made decisions that in an environment where we thought that was normal and that growth would continue forever. And post-COVID, you saw complete reversal of online adoption, reversing back to norm. The market became a lot weaker as people left their homes and started experiencing the world as they should have. And that meant we had to completely rebuild the business. Again, that we've come out of that, and thankfully we went through that period because we built an incredible, sustainable business that will turn a profit this year. And it's, we're great to be in this environment. So I wouldn't change anything, but it's been an extreme situation building in such 2 extreme.
Because looking at your numbers, you did 7 million in 8 months.
Yes, yeah. I think the number was, we got to 7 million run rate in 8 months.
And was that organic, or did you have much seed capital that you put into it? Did you put funds in yourself? What was that structure?
We did a pre-seed round and a seed. So we had capital to invest. Right. We always wanted to raise capital, and it was going to take capital to build the business, build the brands, the sites. And actually, because we grew so quickly, we had to innovate on supply chain. We became the first to manufacture paint on demand with a fully automated supply chain.
Well, this was something I really wanted to tap into, because clearly, the classic thing when people launch D2C brand is one SKU, one product, one size, try and make it as simple as possible to launch. You presumably had to launch with 100 different colors, otherwise the brand doesn't really work. You can't just say it's black or it's black, you have to give people a few different options, right?
Yeah, there's a huge number of SKUs on ours, both sample and paint, and different sheens as well.
What was day one SKU list? Do you remember?
No, but it was 50 colors in 2 bases and 50 samples, and then we had some tools as well.
Wow! So you're getting up to 200 SKUs on day.
Yeah, definitely.
Which definitely would not be the usual advice to a founder starting an e-com business.
No, and that required stock, and we were scaling so quickly, and at a point where there wasn't a number of stock we wouldn't take because the demand was so high. We were 60% out of stock, I think, during that period. And people were buying half-empty cans of paint on Facebook Marketplace.
No,
it was completely insane.
There was a secondary market for paint.
Yes, exactly. And although I think we probably just saw that once, and then just in the
went with PR,
and then obviously when we came out of COVID, we had way too much stock.
Yeah.
That was the challenge. But it meant, again, we innovate on supply chain. Our supply chain now is very scalable. It's manufactured on demand. It's got, very little waste, no inventory. It's got high margins. So
wow.
That environment meant we invested into that supply chain. And I think with us now, rather than, the brand is the most important part of our business, but we've tried to innovate on every single part of rebuilding what is into a modern paint brand.
Yeah, I think ultimately there's clearly a lot of benefit in that kind of D2C switch, because I think that allowed you to accelerate incredibly quickly. But I think what's even more interesting is how you've then taken it to the old school channels. You started with retail, and now you've gone B2B as well. You've actually just gone from little, the layer at the top to rebuilding the entire business, taking on the old guys. Like how did that transition go? How did you get into retail? Like a lot of people, I think, would be interested to understand how you actually crack that, because must be an enormous channel for you now.
Yeah, it's a really important channel, because I think I would imagine north of 90% of the paint is still bought offline. And, whether that's trade buying in store and not buying online, or whether that's the consumer waking up on a Saturday morning and going into B&Q. So we knew to continue to scale, we had to transition to be an omnichannel brand. I think it's important to say that we're online first, because that's where the customer starts their journey, and that's really important, that kind of inspiration phase. And it's really important that we prioritize that and we win on the social channels, and people are still coming to our site, choosing color and buying samples, but that we offer the paint and products when and where they need them. But that transition was both on operations and supply chain. So, managing a D2C business is very different from managing an omnichannel brand. Even the finance team and payment terms and everything has to evolve. Yeah. The product range has to evolve and change. We have 3 brands: Lick for the DIY customer, Lick Pro for trade, and Lick Tools, which is an eco-decorating tool brand. Nice. So it required a complete rebuild, and it required a complete rebuild, I guess, because of the speed we went into stores. Yeah. So, and the scale we did was quite unprecedented for a brand of our stage, certainly in this category.
And was it all B&Q sites in one go, or because they must have a lot of sites, a lot of stock as well?
We're not in all of them, but we're in most of them, in the main ones. But we have up to sort of 13 foot of space and digital screens to support the color. And they're a huge business with a huge market share and an amazing business, to be honest, in the way they operate. We have a COO, a guy called Michael Watson, who's been in the industry for a very long time. He's been transformative for us, and Callum, who works for us as our commercial director. They both built paint brands working with retailers like B&Q. Without that experience, it would have been incredibly difficult. And without the brand we had built, we wouldn't have even had a seat at the table. So we were able to get inbounds from those major retailers that were keen for us to disrupt and innovate in a way that other brands weren't, because of the brand we had built, and because we could, bring a younger demographic into store and resonate with the modern consumer, really.
So, sorry, I was going to say, looking at the UX, the journey, I guess, and that innovation piece, I'm currently renovating my house. I went to B&Q on the weekend, and there was some Lick paint in there. I buy the paint in the shop. I'll put it on the wall. I'll go, that looks good, or it doesn't look good. Your peel and stick innovation, talk to me about that.
Yeah, it is. It uses 95% less paint, so it's better for the environment. It can go through a letterbox, and that was really the main focus of that at the start. It's a better product. It doesn't. You don't have to paint it on your walls. It's not permanent. When people paint samples on their walls, if you paint over it, you can tend to see the layer of paint below. You can move it around to choose to see what it looks like in different color. It's a great product, and it's the first. Well, after that inspiration phase, it's the next step where people interact with our products, where they order them, choose color before they actually buy the paint. And definitely an important step in our journey.
Because I was also looking at Farrow & Ball and other brands, Dulux, etc. And with Farrow & Ball, you can now buy that online, and that's the route that we go, is we take the paint home and then we'll buy it online, I guess. In terms of the user journey, say 90% of people buy typically from shops. Is that over time going to change more so to being online and using your peel and stick innovation to make sure the colour's right? Or do you think there's always going to be a retail element to this market?
Yeah, I think, 75% of customers who buy paint from us, whether it's in store, buy samples first. So it's very sample-driven user behaviour, which is very unique for a D2C brand. And in terms of the way you've got to think about unit economics, acquiring a customer for a sample and then acquiring them again for the paint is problematic. So that in itself is very unique. I think the online adoption will continue to grow. I mean, we know that younger demographic are more likely to buy online. That demographic needs to mature to get to the age to be buying property and decorating. So I think online adoption will grow, and it's going to be a really important channel. And even for the big retailers, a lot of these businesses, like, our trade ranges, Screwfix, they're predominantly a click and collect business. So that in itself is a massive channel, and I guess that's online.
And how are you differentiating yourself in terms of quality? Because I had literally no idea until a few months ago that actually white from one brand is very different to white from another brand. Like, how are you making the colours stand out that are different kind of thing? Because there are so many different variations in the market. How are you cutting through and making that feel different?
Yeah, and it's really tricky in this category because there's not that much awareness of the quality difference in paints, but there is massive differences. So there's obviously kind of depth of color and accuracy of color. So if you went to go color match, you might think it's the same, but there are slight differences, and you might find differences in the room, for instance. But the quality of the paint is really important. For instance, coverage is key. You might buy cheaper paint and it needs twice as many coats, and that is twice as much time or twice as much cost if you're using decorator. That's massively important. The second one is durability. So being able to clean the paint, touch up the paint if you need to. Our focus has always been, we had to be the best paint on the market, both our trade range and our consumer range. And that's what we've done from day one, and we'll continue to do that. And I'm very proud of the products quality that we have. And now really it's a big focus on messaging and trying to communicate to the consumer. You might be able to go and buy cheaper paint, but you'll be painting it for longer, and you'll be repainting it sooner. And there's not that same understanding in this category as that you'd probably find in other categories.
Because you touched upon earlier the fact that, when Gen Z become old enough to buy houses, they might use the paint because they can buy it online, etc. Now, they're hyper-focused on sustainability as well. Why did you guys decide to come up with sustainable tools? Was that with the Gen Z market in mind? Was that just a sort of CSR piece, ESG? What was the reason for that?
We wanted to build a business in a positive way, and sustainability was always going to be a part of that. And I think for any modern brand, it has to be a part of that. But it was also, working with nice people, working with nice investors, and that's why we are B Corp accredited, because it covers such a broad spectrum of those things that we believe in. And sustainability is definitely a core pillar for us. And we, with our category, it is across many different touch points, whether it's making sure there's trace VOC in this water-based paint, to the materials you're using, to the way you're manufacturing. There's so many elements rather than one, all the way to the partnerships we have with charities. So we were working with a sustainable tool company, where we were buying tools from them and selling them, and we ended up acquiring that company and rebranding it. So that was that journey, and those tools are fantastic, and very few people realize that so much of the finish is impacted by the tools you use, and the innovation around bamboo brushes or sugarcane trays are uniquely sustainable, and very proud part of the business.
Because you've done a lot in 5 years. You've grown it to an 8-figure brand. You've raised capital. You started from essentially nothing. Like, you hadn't run a business before yourself, and you've kind of acquired companies. Like, how do you know what to do? Like, what's the right thing to do at the right point? How have you worked that out, having been the sort of first time founder that you are?
Yeah, it's been a crazy 5 years. We've done a lot, and we've run as fast as we can. That was always the goal. I think just adapting, keep making mistakes, learning from them, listening to people. There's a really interesting balance where you need really high conviction, because you need to make sure you believe that you don't go mad, and this idea is a good one. You need conviction because you need to encourage your team to work with you and follow this path, and you need to get investors to support the brand. But you also need to be able to be very agile and change that conviction quite quickly, based on learnings, based on speaking to people, on market dynamics. And I think that's what we've done really well. I think we've had conviction to go fast and really believe in what we're doing, but adapt based on learnings that we've had along the way, whether it be developing a pro brand and the evolution of how we've offered that pro service. Originally it was D2C, and now it's through Screwfix, to going from a D2C business to an omnichannel brand. That's just through adapting from what we're seeing in the market. I think that's probably what we've done well.
It sounds all great on the sort of, the top line. It looks amazing. It is amazing, but it can't have been that easy. Were there times throughout the last 5 years where you thought, actually, this is just ain't going to work? Is it going to fall down?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. I think about the last 5 years mostly on the mistakes and challenges and hard times. And it feels like there has been, so many incredibly hard times, and the impact that that's had on myself and my wife. And, even I find fundraising very challenging. I find it quite emotionally draining.
Do you enjoy it at all?
I think I'm pretty good at it, and I enjoy being good at something. But no, I don't enjoy it. I'm really lucky to be working with amazing investors who have supported the brand. Funds like Felix Capital or Magnus Rousing, people that have believed in our journey and support us, and most of our investors have. But it's when I remember every time we fundraise, I sit down with my wife and sit her down and say, I've got some bad news.
The next 6 months.
Yeah, we're about to go fundraise.
We're going into the bunker.
And there are aspects that have made that easier through the likes of Felix really supporting the brand with their front foot. But yeah, it's really challenging to go out and to present to people something that you're passionate about, that you really believe in, and for them to either say yes, which is great, or no, they don't think it's a good idea.
Me again. I promise we'll get back to the episode in a minute. I just wanted to say thanks so much for listening. Hit that subscribe, hit that follow button. It means a lot. We cannot do this podcast without you guys. Back to the episode. In terms of sacrifices, then, obviously sitting down with the wife and saying the next 6 months is going to be carnage, there's an element of sacrifice there because you may be spending less time at home. But what else have you had to sacrifice or say no to in order to get it to where it is today? Because so many people in your shoes will say yes to everything and then fall down. What have you had to say no to be able to move the ship forwards?
I don't know if I've had to say no to much. You're just always on. There's, if something has to be done, it doesn't matter, what time of day it has to be done. It's actually, I have a young baby now, and it's similar to that. If the baby's hungry, it doesn't matter if you're busy. You've got to look after. And it's the same with having a business and having people work for you and having investors. Just you're on all the time. And that at the early stage, in the intensity of COVID as well, was very challenging and was very mentally challenging.
So consuming.
Yeah, it was way too much, to be honest. And then when we came out and the business started becoming more established, I've definitely found much more of a balance. I play a bit of golf. I found that profoundly impactful on my mental health.
Yeah.
And, I have, as I said, I have a young baby. I spend a really good amount of time with Olo. So I don't think I've necessarily missed things because, in some ways as an entrepreneur, you should have more flexibility.
Yeah.
But
so many entrepreneurs don't, though. You say exactly that. Entrepreneurship should allow you to have flexibility, and there's no point in having money because if you haven't got time, it's completely irrelevant. But so many entrepreneurs don't do that. They just take everything on and then burn out. How do you manage that?
I had a really interesting debate with someone who said I took off a really good amount of time when my wife was, when we first had a baby. And I spoke to a founder who literally took a day.
Oh, wow.
And I remember saying to him, but it's your time, it's your business. Like if you can't even do that owning a business, what's the point of it all? And you can get so sucked into it. And yes, even my time off, would have one eye on the phone. But I think it's learning about how you work. And I work in very good sort of intensity, but I'm not someone who is going to be still working at 1 a.m. in the morning. If I do that, I'll do that a few days at the start of the week, and by the end of the week I'll need some time off. So it'd be pointless to do. So I make sure I focus on the right areas. I make sure I have a really good team, C-suite team that I trust, that can operate without me being hands-on with every moment. And that's probably, to be honest, a big part of it, being able to not micromanage, being able to have a team that runs your business. Because my journey is quite highs and lows in terms of intensity of work. During fundraising, I have to stop looking at the business and completely focus on fundraising. If I didn't have a good management to be able to do that, then the business wouldn't function. That allows me also on the odd occasion to go play golf.
Yes. Well, I think also with one eye on, the exit. You've got investors, you've got people on your cap table. You need to be thinking about that, even if you don't have an intention to do it imminently. The only way to do that is to have a good management team, to have a machine that runs without you being present. Otherwise, you will have to do an earnout for 20 years. So, I guess even just kind of thinking more long term, you have to build that in. Do you have any advice on how you've built that team? How you've built processes, how you've built it so that the machine can run while you go and get your 18 holes in?
Yeah, I want to make sure I'm not perceived to constantly playing golf. But the truth is that I'm quite passionate about that. That the odd game of golf and taking a step away makes me work such a high quality level of work when I'm in the office, and that's a much healthier and better output than during COVID, when it was just so extreme. The business would never have lasted if we carried on the way we were. For me, it's all about hiring the right people, but the best people that you can find. Like, you should be going for the best person in the world for that role, incentivizing them accordingly, and giving them space and autonomy to make decisions. And I also think it's really important to protect that person from all the elements that you get as a business, so that they can focus on the work. So pressure from investors, or bad days, or I saw a great analogy of a sort of founder with an umbrella protecting their team from all the shitstorm that was going on outside. And I'm quite passionate about that as well. And we have an amazing team that I believe have complete autonomy in the work they do and freedom, and that has been massively important in how this business is scaled.
Well, I think that is a key thing that people maybe don't realize if they haven't run a business, started a business themselves, is the kind of highs and lows that you experience as a founder. And I think sometimes also as a founder, you think that it's good to share that with the team. But in reality, most employees, and the reason people are employees, is they don't want that up and down. They're not kind of emotionally tuned to be able to deal with that. How much do you share with the team? Is it just certain team members, for example, your CFO, that gets to know the gory details of the fundraise? How do you balance that?
It's really hard balance, because you also want them to feel like it's their business. Every business has equity, and that's why they're here, to build a brand together. You want them to have full transparency and visibility. But you're right, complete transparency can sometimes be a negative. So it's probably, C-suite that really understands, let's say, the pressures of fundraising. But it's mostly my wife who really understands the impact, who's also our CMO, funny enough.
Amazing.
But yeah, it's hard to get that transparency right. But to be honest, the fundraising, I kind of just get my head down, go and do it, leave the team, and to focus on building the brand.
Have you had to sort of learn anything over the last 5 years that you maybe didn't think you needed to learn? So, for instance, management would be an example for some entrepreneurs. You might have been managed at your previous business when you were at the hedge fund, so you might know what good management and bad management looks like. What have you had to sort of pick up, learn, upskill over the last 5 years that you just think so fundamental now?
I think there's kind of two ways to answer that. One is, what I think is really important, is knowing what you're good at and knowing what you're bad at, and making sure you have a team around that supplements. So for me, I've got quite an ADHD-like personality. I'm not incredibly strong with details, and not a great manager, to be honest.
You sound like a great manager.
Thank you. But and I've never really had a good manager, to be honest.
Oh, really?
I've never, all the business I've worked for have been startups, they've been small. I've never experienced, to be a good manager is a full-time role. So I made sure I built the team around that. And in terms of upskilling and learning, it's really a bit of everything. It's amazing the breadth of aspects you learn in the business, in truth. And I think for my role, it's making sure a little bit of everything, rather than going completely deep in one subject, because in truth, there's no point in me supporting our digital marketing manager we know we can hire someone who's going to be far better at that role than me. So it's about understanding each channel, understanding the fundraiser, and making sure you're across the finance for sure. But it's breadth, really.
It's been an amazing journey so far, and I think you've built a formidable brand here. And the viewers of this show, how can they follow along? And what do you think the next 5 years looks like for Lick?
We're completely focused on building the biggest paint brand in Europe. We're doing a crowdfund at the moment, so that's massively important for us. We are a community-driven brand. The community is our foundations, and being able to offer our decorators a chance to invest in the business and be part of the business, our growth journey, is a very proud moment. And it's about growing distribution, growing product range, growing the brand awareness, both our own channels and working with retail partners across Europe. It's the most exciting moment that we've had in the business, to be honest, as we've come out of this transition. All the work that we've done is sort of working so well. It's a great place to be.
In terms of importance of co-founders and just generally kind of bringing in individuals across the journey, with Sam specifically, he was obviously at the previous business that you were at. What skill set does he bring that you don't have? And would you have got to where you are today without a co-founder?
I think it's a really interesting subject, and for me, the answer would be no. I needed a co-founder and continue to need one. And Sam is an amazing person to work with. We definitely supplement skill sets. So whereas I told you my ADHD, I'm a bit not all over the place, but he's the opposite. He's very detail driven. In those early days, when we were building the business, his focus was all across the growth marketing. So setting up our digital channels, executing those sides. That element was massively important at the early stages, and he allowed me to go and raise capital during those periods. He is a wonderful guy and lacks any ego, so he allows me to have an ego.
That's why we're on this podcast, not his.
Exactly. Which means we're never fighting over who's CEO, and that's really important. And we've both gone through just very different journeys in the last 5 years, and both have learned a lot during the way. But fundamentally, he's an absolutely lovely guy and very talented, and for that reason, and very positive, and for that reason, it's worked very well. I know people have sort of negative journeys, but those early days when you're on your own, you're getting lots of no's from investors. Having no one there to sort of push you in the trickier times, we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be running this business if we didn't have that relationship.
You can kind of get, I guess, twice as much done as well because you're both fighting for the same thing. In terms of what his background is, then obviously yours is in banking. When you had that career, so to speak, what did he do before that?
Yeah, he was much more of a brave entrepreneur, to be honest.
Was he?
He set up before he joined Airtasker. He set up a bicycle company,
right?
And again, has wanted to be an entrepreneur from very early doors. He was working growth marketing at a business called Together before he joined Lick, and was working growth marketing at Airtask, which is how I met him, and has a fantastic skill set in marketing. And then he's now actually working in our ops side and running our ops, and is taking a lot of those skills that he has to developing our operations and innovating in that space. So again, yeah, very different skill sets, very complementary, and it's been a great work.
Something that's interesting and sort of ahead of its time, I guess, back in the COVID sort of era was the building of a community. So obviously you guys have got hundreds of thousands of followers on social. I was with Lego a few weeks ago, who have also got a community to specifically talk to their customers, but also test and iterate products before it goes to mass market. FC obviously have got their own community as well. How important has community been to both funding the business from a crowdfund perspective, but also tapping into a specific type of market? Because they're becoming more and more apparent for more and more businesses now.
Yeah, it's the community is the foundations for our business. So I kind of describe it as it's like it's a dinner party and everyone's chatting to each other and inspiring each other to decorate and helping each other decorate. And that's very different from other communities, which might be all sort of non-participating and viewing. Ours is a very engaged, very interactive community, and that fuels the business. It fuels the growth of the business. If you want to get if you want to be inspired, you go onto social and you see how other community members have done up their homes. And for us, it's so important.
In terms of that community piece, you guys joined the Virgin Mentorship sort of program, Virgin Startup program. That must have unlocked a community of entrepreneurs, scale-up founders, contacts that you guys can tap into. How important was that sort of Virgin relationship in the early days?
I actually didn't. I just was a mentor there.
Oh, you were, sorry, I misunderstood. You were just a mentor.
Yeah.
I'll re-ask that question.
Pre-Lick.
Oh, okay.
Can we just confirm what the total is now?
I don't know. I don't like to say it out loud.
Okay.
8 figures.
But online, there's
say over 30 million.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So you've obviously come from a banking background. You understand how to use capital to grow your business. You've now raised over 30 million for the business. Do you have any advice for our listeners in terms of how you craft the story in order to get one of the biggest and best investors in London on board, and then actually one of the biggest and best investors globally with your Series A round on board as well? Like how do you do that, having not raised money before?
Yeah, I think there's a step back, which is, do you need the money? When do you need the money? Who do you need it from? There are so many different routes to raising capital. You can raise venture capital, you can, which comes with, pref stacks and, for example, and investors who are, very demanding in terms of the output they want to see and the return they want to see. You can go from family offices, or the crowdfunding, or not raise or bootstrap or try and build the business before raising. We went down the route to raise early. We knew we had to invest in the space and we wanted to grow quickly. And that has allowed us to scale at the speed that we have, and adapt along the journey. We've achieved a huge amount in 5 years that we're very proud of, and we needed capital to do that. Even to scale, we needed to invest in the supply chain, we needed to invest in the product range, then building the brand, and it's required capital. And I think it would have taken decades to do the same without capital, if it was even possible. We're going against businesses that are very, very large. I mean, the largest is Sherwin-Williams, which is over 90 billion in valuation. These businesses like that have massive infrastructure, very unique margins. Because of that infrastructure, we knew we had to invest, so raising capital was the route we went down. We started at the beginning as a pre-seed, speaking to angels, making sure we were speaking to the right people that invested in our category at our stage. That first raise was one of the hardest, I think. I mean, we got a lot of maybes, and then we kind of gave up. And our last meeting was with Alex Chesterman and Simon Franks, who invested, and that was the last meeting I was going to take before going to find a job.
Wow!
And that yes, from really impressive entrepreneurs, meant a lot of the other people we spoke to followed, and we got to raise that round. Then making sure with the seed round, we were speaking to seed investors rather than later stage. And Felix for us has been a really important partner, and they're an amazing fund. They understand consumer, and they understand the highs and lows of consumer, and they have supported us through each round. And for that has made the process a lot more manageable.
And did you, once you had those angels, did you then kind of utilize those angels to get introductions to the next level, and then use that next level to get introductions to, the Series A investors? Is there anything you can talk about in terms of using network or using contacts in order to get these massive fundraisers done?
Yeah, I think what each stage of angel or investor has meant, we built a very I'd say I'm very proud of the cap table we built. It's made up of very, very experienced institutions, entrepreneurs, family offices, and that is definitely something investors look at, and that's benefited us. I've always treated it like a sales pitch, a sales channel. So if you wake up in the morning and doing a sales role, you would be calling and messaging a certain amount of people a day and following them up. And, I had head down at the beginning of the day and target as many people as I can, have as many meetings as I can, refine the sales pitch, refine the pitch deck, get advice on the pitch deck from people who know what they're doing, and just constantly keep at it and making sure, I think final point is really making sure your investors that are investing in you are very close to the business. You're updating them frequently. They know everything about the business. So when you do need to raise capital, they're very close to the business, and that's very supportive. And that in itself has allowed us to raise next rounds probably a lot easier than it would have been, because the people that we're speaking to are very aware of how well the business is doing and are very fond of the business.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. I think it's a great brand. I've seen it in B&Q. I've seen it online. We'll probably see it everywhere now. It's like the yellow car syndrome, no doubt. Appreciate your time. Good luck with the fundraise, and here's to the future.
Thanks very much for having me. I mean, we're just getting started, so keep following our journey. And if you want to participate in the crowdfund, we're doing that through Seeders platform, and it's great to be on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers.
That's a wrap for this episode of Success is in the Mind with me, Oliver Burce, and Hugo Tilmouth. We hope you enjoyed today's conversations and have taken away some valuable insights to fuel your own journey. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs a little bit of inspiration. You can also follow us on social media for the behind-the-scenes content. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, keep pushing forward, stay curious, and remember, success is always in the mind.